Let me sit up then. I am Danny Jordaan. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the 2010 FIFA World Cup in South Africa. You see, I've got my legal team here. They'll advise me.
Most of us used to play soccer. I was hopeless.
Actually, the majority of people in South Africa are football mad.
The 2010 FIFA World Cup will be organized in South Africa.
In 1948, we were a country that legislated racism with apartheid. And in that time, sport, for a millisecond, gave you a chance to escape.
There's a little bit of illusion around it. I mean, sport itself is not going to unite a nation. You actually have to have things that are far bigger.
So a new democracy, a new non-racial South Africa has not meant a better life for people. People need a place to escape. Sport gives you that escape. And people need a home. They need a cathedral to go to every week and to worship.
There will definitely be a feel-good factor, and I think that is something, given South Africa where we are at the moment, and people not having jobs, I think that's something, I don't know if you want to call it tangible, but it is something important. But at the end of the day, it's not going to put food on their plates and it's not going to give them jobs.
I think this is a very special thing itself. Just the fact that it's the first played World Cup played on the African continent. And I think if you are going through the country and if you are talking to the people here around, so you feel it's an issue. The people start to talk about it. I think it will be a unique experience.
We'll make more business if 20 to 10 come. I'm so happy. We'll make more money.
In June and July 2010, South Africa will play host to the FIFA World Cup and will bask in a moment of national pride and international affirmation that would have been unthinkable a mere 20 years ago. In the 1980s, South Africa was a pariah state, reviled for its policies of racial segregation, its exclusion of black people from the political process, and its incarceration and murder of black leaders. Over a period of 300 years, black South Africans had, through conquest, dispossession, and laws regulating their movement and economic activity, been reduced to a reservoir of cheap labor for the benefit of an increasingly affluent white community. The world expressed its opposition to South Africa's policies by disinvesting in the apartheid economy, implementing trade sanctions, banning arms sales, and imposing sports and cultural boycotts. The toll of economic and political pressure and the increasingly ungovernable state of the country resulted in the negotiation of a settlement in the early 1990s. Elections proceeded and the African National Congress triumphed, leading to Nelson Mandela's inauguration as state president in May 1994. The achievement of a democratic political order and the removal of apartheid's yoke have not, however, been accompanied by delivery of the vast majority of black South Africans from their circumstances of poverty and disadvantage. They remain trapped in a cycle that has been centuries in the making. There are exceptions to the rule towards the top of the economic pyramid, with conspicuous examples of black upward mobility, the so-called black diamonds, having achieved millionaire and billionaire status in little over a decade. The sad reality for the masses at the base is that their circumstances remain as abject as ever. Unemployment, depending upon how one measures it, is between 25% and 40%. Millions live in shacks and do not have running water or electricity. Hospitals are ill-equipped to cope with a health crisis of staggering proportions. The HIV/AIDS epidemic has, according to the UN AIDS Agency, left an estimated 5.5 million South Africans infected. It is estimated that there are currently almost 1,000 AIDS-related deaths each day in South Africa. A key element of South Africa's bid to host the World Cup was its argument that the tournament would provide momentum to growth and development, and that the people would reap the benefits. This film does not question whether South Africa should host the World Cup. The opportunities the tournament offers to market the country and to invoke national pride are unquestionable. A central inquiry is why a developing country with extreme socio-economic challenges would choose or be expected to divert funds from investment in hospitals, housing and education to build huge sports arenas that will rival first world amenities. An initiative despite the existence of existing facilities in which the 1995 Rugby World Cup and FIFA's 2009 Confederations Cup were staged. The World Cup is an international television phenomenon, with FIFA claiming that 1 billion viewers will be watching the event. South Africa will not share in the multi-billion-dollar television revenues that FIFA is set to receive. Among many questions relating to the manner in which the event is to be staged is whether, during those 4 weeks, stadia boasting 21st century design elements, or that can accommodate 70,000 as opposed to 50,000 spectators, will have any bearing upon the quality of the football, or upon the enjoyment of fans gathered in homes and bars in London, Berlin, Rio, and anywhere else.
South Africans are passionate about football. They have vuvuzelas that the world will see for the first time. So this will be a very noisy World Cup of song and dance and celebration.
When it comes to organizational things, being a German myself, probably Germany will take a bit of beating. But it will have a different flavor. It will have a flavor of Africa.
The people of South Africa are going to win the World Cup in terms of hosting it and giving people a good time. It's not about soccer as such. To us, it's about people being here and enjoying our beautiful country.
1 billion people worldwide, they're watching on South Africa. In 2010, this will automatically raise the profile of South Africa, but also on the African continent, to show they are really capable and willing to organize such a huge event.
In the last couple of World Cups, it was ordered excitement, if I could say it. Here, it will be uninhibited excitement.
In Germany, you'd have a guy very earnest telling you, if you ask them a question, how do I get to ABC, without smiling and say, there, and it'll be right. In South Africa, they'll smilingly, laughingly point you in the wrong direction and you'll go the wrong way, but you'll feel good about it.
We were made to believe that Germans are not friendly. The history books we read were about Hitler and things like that. It's only when you get there that you understand that no, it's not like that. And we are hoping that South Africa will also be a country of choice. When people think holiday, they'll think South Africa.
So what are we going to have that's going to be different? Remember the last time there was a World Cup in Latin America, which probably is a bit similar to us in the sense of fans that have a real difference. When you hear the sound of vuvuzelas, you see people's experience. It's the safest place, the friendliest place on earth, but the absolute die-hard fans who express it through their fashion, the clothes they wear, the way they behave, the excitement they have.
We had the 1995 World Cup, and there was this incredible feeling, briefly. And it was, I mean, it was a little bit illusory because you know, a lot of white South Africans really felt that the country had kind of completely come together. And there certainly were a lot of black South Africans who were excited about the rugby and winning. And Madiba as our kind of figurehead, and Madiba putting on the number 6 jersey.
Number 6 hands it to number 6. And what a symbolic handshake that is.
So when we held the African Cup of Nations in 1996, a year later, I played with that, and nation building is a whole new ball game. The sport definitely has that potential to do this kind of uniting thing, especially if you have figures like Mandela and Tutu.
Sepp Blatter's legacy is what he's working on is Africa. He wants people in 100 years probably to talk about what did Blatter bring to world football. And what he wants is Africa.
He basically promised. He said, I'll make sure. I did a cartoon just before the announcement was made. And the 2010 host country is, and there's Sepp Blatter, and Sepp Blatter is God. God giving life to Adam is, you know, a nice bit of hyperbole, I suppose, for the soccer.
It means a lot for South Africa and the rest of Africa, because this is one event that's never happened in the African soil. So I strongly believe that having it here in South Africa means a lot, not only to South Africans, but to the rest of other Africans, such as ourselves, us traders, yeah. That's what I believe in.
If there's one thing to bring the people of South Africa together, it's going to be in one name called sport. And come 2010, I think the whole world will come together.
South Africa leading Cameroon by a goal to 0. Lovely layoff. Khwedisa McCarthy.
For the country, it's gonna be exciting, you know. People are gonna be excited to see, especially the young ones, to see their overseas heroes coming here to play in our home soil. So it's gonna be great. The whole country will be behind Bafana Bafana. And for me as a player, it's gonna give me an opportunity to shine.
I think it's going to do us the world of good, and I would say it's well worth the price.
Right now, there are some opportunities, like building like stadiums, but right now I haven't got a job from it. Okay, but I think soon I'll get a job like building a stadium, and I'll be happy to do it.
In anticipation of hosting the World Cup, South Africa has embarked on a multi-billion-dollar program of construction of new stadia and renovation of some existing ones.
There will be wonderful stadiums. I think the world has never seen stadiums like this we will have here in South Africa for the World Cup. They are amazing, and most of the things are really on track. So we are confident that the things will be ready.
The flagship will be Soccer City, a 95,000-seater venue in Johannesburg, close to Soweto, the home to South Africa's iconic teams, Orlando Pirates and Kaizer Chiefs. The stadium, which was the venue for South Africa's triumph in the African Nations Cup in 1996, has undergone a major overhaul to transform it into one of the world's most modern sports arenas. The tournament will open at Soccer City on the 11th of June 2010, and the champions will lift the trophy here following the final 4 weeks later. Cape Town is the preferred destination of international visitors to South Africa. The historic Newlands Stadium, with a capacity of 50,000, is synonymous with that city. It will, however, play no part in the 2010 tournament. The municipality, having chosen to meet FIFA's requirement of a 70,000-seater facility in order to host a semi-final, has opted not to upgrade Newlands, but to build a new stadium at Greenpoint. Durban is Africa's busiest port and South Africa's major domestic holiday destination. Kings Park Stadium was the venue for South Africa's first post-apartheid football international against Cameroon and hosted a semi-final of the Rugby World Cup in 1995. The local municipality has abandoned its initial plans to upgrade Kings Park. A new stadium is being built across the road. In Port Elizabeth, the city from which Danny Jordan, the CEO of the local organising committee, hails, Nelson Mandela Bay Stadium is being built from scratch. Despite its relatively modest capacity of 48,000, the new stadium will stage 8 World Cup matches. A new stadium is being built in Polokwane, formerly Petersburg in Limpopo province, bordered by Mozambique, Zimbabwe and Botswana. The stadium is named after Peter Mokaba, an ANC youth leader, cabinet minister and AIDS denialist, who died at the age of 42 amidst rumours that he was a victim of the epidemic. The Mpumalanga province, which borders Swaziland and Mozambique, is renowned for its scenic beauty, wildlife and game reserves. The Mbombela Stadium is currently under construction, 6 kilometres from the provincial capital Nelspruit. It will have a capacity of 46,000 and will host 4 World Cup matches. 4 of South Africa's established stadia, Ellis Park in central Johannesburg, Loftus Versfeld in Pretoria, the Free State Stadium in Bloemfontein and the Royal Bafokeng Stadium in Rustenburg have undergone minor refurbishment. They will stage 25 World Cup matches between them. FIFA declared the Confederations Cup, staged in South Africa in June 2009, to be a success. Every one of those matches was played in stadia that were in existence before South Africa won the bid to host the World Cup.
To the credit of the ANC-led council at the time, they wanted to build a stadium near Athlone, which is in a historical coloured area near the Cape Flats. And basically FIFA said we can't have stadiums near shacks. We can't show the world this kind of poverty. These are the actual documents of FIFA. And this was then supported by the South African government, that the stadium will be near Greenpoint and will be hidden away from the degradation and indignities that people suffer every day on the Cape Flats.
I think there was a lot of politics involved. I think about the supporters. They want to be near the soccer. Greenpoint, it's just your rich people, it's your white people. The majority of the supporters is black and colours. If the soccer stadium would have been here in Athlone, it would have been nice for the people of Cape Town.
But if you only have people who can pay 20 Rand and 50 Rand, you can't have a viable stadium.
I think in the long term for soccer development in South Africa, Athlone would have been preferred. But of course, if you look into the context of costs, it would have been obviously much cheaper to have it had in Newlands.
If we increase the capacity of Newlands to 70,000, what would be the demand on the transport into and out of the stadium? If you look at those roads, it's just impossible.
Clearly, the argument in Cape Town was transparently absurd because the existing stadium is on a railway line, on at least 2 main roads, famously scenic site. And at minimal cost, they could expand the seating to, I believe, 65,000. They were really a question of 5,000 or 6,000 short. I don't know at what stage the TV screen picks up the difference between 64,000 and 70,000. That is obvious nonsense. One suspects that it has been calculated to exclude available facilities, to actually force the issue of new facilities.
Look, it's near complete now and we're all getting excited, you know, it's a world-class stadium and we'd love to play there, but the reality is that they should have improved Newlands to a level of playing at least a quarter-final, if not a semi, that they couldn't do. And invest a lot more money in the localized infrastructure for football, because I'm looking at football on a long-term basis, and to change that, one stadium cannot do that.
Clearly, I think it is an over-expense for the city of Cape Town, who in turn is going to have to get money back from the ratepayers.
They have Newlands, once again a historic ground, but that was rejected, ostensibly originally, because you wanted to take the stadiums near the townships. And the language used by the government was that people who want to use Newlands didn't want to have a stadium that would benefit the poorer people of Cape Town. But in typical South African fashion, an argument is then made for having Greenpoint. So in South Africa, you can argue these things 2 or 3 ways by the same person. I mean, George Orwell lives.
Well, originally, in the original bid book, Durban was going to renovate its existing stadium. The Sharks, who they leased the land from us, but they own the stadium, they said, oh, it'll cost 38 million rand to upgrade the stadium to be at FIFA standards. Obviously, because the city was going to pick up that tab, we then started commissioning people, and the figure very quickly moved from 38 million rand to about 700 million rand at that stage. This was, remember, about 4 to 5 years ago. And as the figures started to rise, it became more economically viable to actually build a new stadium.
It's a joke, really, you know, and in fact, these things almost take sometimes Monty Python-esque forms. So in Durban, for example, you have a big rugby stadium that can seat about 50,000 people. It's been used for a semi-final in a World Cup for rugby. The city fathers, the provincial government, national government, decide to build a stadium right opposite the Kings Park Stadium. So one stadium is going to become obsolete, which would be Kings Park Stadium.
I think in terms of development objectives, it clearly does not make sense to build a new stadium at such a huge cost, especially in a province where there's historically deep inequalities.
The huge stadium will never be used again. We don't have those kinds of functions. Our local games, even derby games, might attract 30,000 people at the max in great times. That's Pirates versus Chiefs. But local derbies, maybe 5 to 10,000 people.
We build it. This one is the nice one, the stadium. But they told us if you are going to marry it, you can come and marry it inside the stadium.
So it's a stadium that, from an economic point of view, needs to be about 54,000 seats. And that's what it will be. For the World Cup, we'll increase that to 70,000 seats. If we get an Olympics, we can increase it to about 85 to 90,000 seats. So we've designed it bearing in mind that when we do win the Olympics, and we will win it, we in fact are able to be the best choice for Africa. Slowly people are understanding it. You know, people are skeptics, but I think they've begun to understand as we've shown them what vision we have.
Dennis Brutus was imprisoned on Robben Island, alongside Nelson Mandela and Walter Sisulu in the 1960s. Following his release, he was instrumental in having South Africa expelled from the Olympic movement.
So what it means is you're spending millions or even billions on 2010, and while you're doing that to justify it, you're saying, well, the structures we create for 2010 will then be useful for at some future time to the Olympics. But it must be understood very clearly that the commitment in terms of resources to the Olympics will be even greater than the commitment of the resources to 2010. And if people discover that 2010, you know, was a dog who wasn't going to hunt, as they say in America, they say, why should we do it a second time?
The cost of building a new stadium versus refurbishing is well over R1 billion rand of extra costs. And I think here in Durban, you'll just see examples where the rugby team is trying its best to avoid having its stadium torn down and being forced to move into the new stadium because they know that they'll never fill it and they'll not be able to afford the rent on it.
There is a sentimental attachment which defies logic sometimes, but it's real.
What will become of that old stadium?
Well, it's a discussion we'll still have with Sharks. The first decision they've got to make is when they come over. It's really an old stadium, and at some point it would have to be demolished.
The Mbombela municipality sought to secure its place in the World Cup by building a new stadium, which will host 4 matches over a period of 10 days in June 2010. They reason that this will promote tourism in the region during and beyond the tournament. The stadium is being built at a site adjacent to the Matafin location, where a poor local community faces an uncertain future. Residents understand that they will be evicted ahead of the tournament, but do not know where they'll go. Their sense that all is not well has been fueled by allegations of corruption surrounding aspects of the stadium project, and the report that the land on which the stadium is being built was sold for R1, a dime. Students used to attend school in buildings next to what has become the stadium construction site. In 2006, the students were evicted from those premises to make way for the construction company, which now uses the buildings as its offices. The students have been moved into temporary prefabricated steel classrooms on a nearby site which is to have a road running through it. As at December 2008, when interviews were conducted with affected parties, no plans had been devised to accommodate the students in alternative and permanent facilities. The only certainty is that they will not be returning to their old school. Those buildings are to be demolished to make way for a stadium parking lot.
In Mbombela, up in Mpumalanga, the story that has gone on and on about how money has been spread around and corruption has been rife. Local and other politicians who've gotten their little slice of the pie. It's the ones that already have and those that want to get their fingers in the honeypot that have benefited tremendously. It's a world that is full of greed, full of self-interest and self-promotion.
There was huge enthusiasm and huge excitement that the World Cup was coming to South Africa, the World Cup was coming to Africa, and that in many people's minds this was the solution to the economic hardships which many people face. If you go out into the communities surrounding the Nelspruit town or the Mbombela municipality, you can see that that enthusiasm has somewhat subsided and died down.
I think it's very much impossible to benefit.
They can only have X amount of labourers. So I can't see very much benefit for this particular community, to tell you the truth.
When the project was initiated, there were problems. There was a board of trustees that were set up for the Matsafeni Trust, and they had to work on the agreements between the municipalities in terms of the land, and then the stadium was to be built. But I think there was no proper explanation as to the notorious R1 deal. So the concern from the community now is that the stadium is almost done and they don't see anything as far as the school's building is concerned. And I think that is what is creating a lot of discord from the school children and the parents themselves, fearing that if the project completes, then everybody will forget about them in the schools.
It's one of the thorny issues, I must be honest. The last time we engaged with the Department of Education and Public Works, and from the municipality side, it would be in our interest that those learners are accommodated and that there's clarity on the issue.
We were told the land that they provided to us, that they are going to be building a ring road along that road.
I don't understand, why there would be schools built, money spent close to 16 million, and in the process, there's discovery that the schools are built on the site where the road would have to be constructed.
They think maybe with us here in Mpumalanga, we are fools. They point figures, somebody point to the other, somebody point to the other. They don't come to the truth.
Before we were moved, it was a proper school, built with blocks. Then the conditions were normal, like other schools. Then we have to move. At last we are about 66. There is no oxygen that is coming in or out because it's too much work. You can't live.
The heat, I think it's killing the children. What they are doing, it's racist against people who are black like us. I think that thing is about race. Because if these people were white, they were supposed to be built a school long time before this project come here.
As on that day, there were drones, tear gas and stuff there.
When I was at the top there, and then I've seen there was a pending classes there, and the office of the principal was spent there.
One morning, then there was a blockade. Nobody would be able to to go out. There's unfortunately one entrance to that community. So these school kids were there with a few parents as well, as early as 4 o'clock in the morning. So when we came through, we could see, there was heavy presence of police as well.
The students burned down the school on that day.
The kids, by so doing, I think they were trying to show us their anger, you see. So we've tried to consult somewhere and somehow, especially from the Department of Education. This is their responsibilities. So they are the ones who are supposed to come and sort it out, all these problems, you see. And that is not good and that is not acceptable.
On the police station, they beat us to tell the truth the day they arrested me. We were pulled in a small room, the 5 of us. They put us plastics on our head so that we couldn't see them, and handcuffs on our bed so that they could beat us.
It seems embarrassing to municipality. They don't want to see a sheikh around the stadium. We are not going to move anyway because our ancestors has lived here and they've died here, so we are not going to go anyway.
I've been hearing rumors that they are moving us to somewhere, I don't know where they are going to move us.
There is some dynamics and that political situation that we are facing here at Matafen. Maybe it will happen because you have to understand me clearly. I don't say they can't move and I don't say they will be moved.
They are losing their places and us, our education. This stadium is been hitting me a lot. Because now I am having a criminal record. Next year I'll be doing matric, then I don't have to apply for bursaries and stuff because of this stadium.
I am still not convinced that this stadium in Mbombela was very well thought through. There is currently no contingency plan saying what's actually going to happen to this stadium once the World Cup is gone. Nobody's talking about it, nobody's doing any planning about it, and in the end of the day, one can only think that the stadium is going to stand redundant and empty afterwards.
We want it to be utilized so that it doesn't become, an area that is not used.
Well, there's a term used, a white elephant.
I was avoiding that.
In a country of 300 years of racial oppression, stigmatization, stereotyping, sense of inferiority. Suddenly the world is coming to your doorstep. Suddenly the world sees you as important. You don't think about the broader circumstance, how much it's costing. You just think about yourself as somebody validated as a South African and as an African.
Soccer City Stadium is by far the biggest, bigger than Yokohama Stadium, 70,000, bigger than Stade de France, 80,000, bigger than the Berlin Olympic Stadium, 80,000. This is a 94,000-seater stadium.
You can show yourself to the world as, equal to everybody. You can build as big a stadium as Germany can build. It's the Texas syndrome, and it's a bit pathetic, really, both in terms of the victim of that and the perpetrator to have exploited it.
We're really going to see post the World Cup, when it becomes very obvious that these stadiums are going to be empty shells, that our money has been used for what is really a pyramid scheme.
You'll have 1 or 2 football games a season, maybe when Chiefs play Pirates in the final of something. But I mean, at the moment, we're not even filling our stadiums regularly for Bafana games, and those aren't even 90,000 seaters. But, that's not FIFA's problem, and they're not particularly interested in that either.
The South Korean World Cup is a classic example of where stadia remained empty and very unused. So we have a history of this.
Now, if you look at the location of the World Cup stadiums in Korea and Japan, and in particular in Japan, they moved all of the stadiums outside the city, and people simply, they are not going there anymore.
Now, of course, what we're left with is a series of 9 huge white elephants that are going to be a drain on the municipal and also the national fiscus for many, many years to come.
The sinfulness of what we have done now is excruciating in terms of the misappropriation of resources.
When you build these enormous stadia, you're shifting those resources, particularly cement, from building schools or hospitals. And then you have these huge structures standing empty and being used to a very limited extent. They become white elephants.
If we are building universities, why shouldn't we not build major international stadium? The problem with the youth is lack of opportunity. We must get them into sport. As you say, a child in sport is a child out of court. They must sit in FNB Stadium with the parent and say, you know, one day I want to play on this ground. I want to play against Brazilian. Those are things that kids dream about. They don't dream to go to hospital.
It's incredible benefit to FIFA. I mean, that's quite transparent, just simply because FIFA has a formula in which it operates by. I mean, the television rights are its main source of income. So that's already been signed up, and that goes back to FIFA coffers. And it is able to then sell off space in the stadium for products. There's a monopoly that operates. So, for example, if Budweiser gets the sort of contract for beer, you can only drink a Budweiser in the stadium. McDonald's. So they have these relationships with big capital, big transnationals. And so FIFA is well looked after. The space inside the stadium and just around the stadium is basically FIFA's. It's almost like they're little Vaticans. They have a sort of diplomatic immunity and they can operate like that.
Yeah, I think let's be under no illusions. This is about money. FIFA's about money, international soccer is about money. Corporate sponsorships pay for that. What they demand, i.e. exclusivity, these exclusive zones, the soccer officials are going to jump.
But it's very clear that FIFA has its obligations towards our sponsors and our partners. And of course, they have a right to be there.
The challenge is for the country that hosts it, because if the bulk of the money has already been taken out of the country, they don't benefit from those television rights. They have to look for longer-term benefits. And one of the ways that is justified, well, there's 2 ways that's justified normally. One is that the infrastructural development starts to create jobs. And secondly, by hosting a successful World Cup, you put yourself on the world map for tourism and other forms of investment. These are the twin legs in which it stands, but it's much more contingent. It's much more ephemeral. It's much more neither here nor there than FIFA's. FIFA's already got its money.
Africa is marketed today through war, through famine, through dictators, and the like. That's what the majority of news says about us. Now people will say, well, remember that thing that we had in Africa. From the marketing point of view, it's very big.
We've got, unfortunately, a development model chosen by a small elite at the top that's really going to impoverish people for a long time to come, and the huge opportunity to spread the wealth around a bit, as Barack Obama's even saying he'll do in the US, was missed by this group at the top of the ANC. I think they had so much credibility and prestige in winning the fight against apartheid that it just gave them that space to do elite deals, corrupt deals, lots and lots of, the arms deal, lots of very insensitive and insane economic activities. And that's been our great tragedy in having a post-apartheid society that's more unequal than even under apartheid.
Well, I'd like to think of the entire World Cup as sort of a progeny or a child of the macroeconomic policy that the ANC implemented in the 1990s, where the country was promised great things, massive job creation, infrastructural development, and benefits for the majority of the population. Most of those promises haven't come true.
The gap is actually widening. Usually they talk of Brazil and South Africa in pretty much the same terms. But the latest reports are that South Africa is in fact actually becoming even worse in terms of this gap between rich and poor. We have millionaires. In fact, we now have billionaires in South Africa, as opposed to people living in desperate poverty. Some of them living under the same conditions that they lived under during the apartheid era. And some of them are saying that conditions have actually become worse for them.
My sense is that the approach, not just to this World Cup, but I think it's a universal approach, is one of appearance and perception, where stadia and what the world sees on the screen become much more important than what's actually going on behind the scenes.
People ask me often, why build these stadiums? Isn't it stupid? Of course, in building these stadiums, it is the most transparent way you can understand this synergy between the new black elite and old white capital.
I was on a FIFA tour. FIFA took us to the stadiums. I spoke to some of the construction workers. I mean, they're being paid 18 Rand an hour. That's 4,000 Rand a month. So, yes, I mean, I don't know if you want to call that a benefit to them, because, I mean, that's the kind of money they would get for any job. So the fact that somebody else is earning millions, they're not benefiting from that.
The construction industry has benefited tremendously from the construction of these new stadia. But I think more importantly, in the South African political terms, new black economic empowerment partners have also benefited greatly. Local empowerment companies hiving themselves off onto larger construction companies, because obviously that was written into many of the contracts.
And so you'll see all white firms like Group 5 linking up with new black empowerment firms. And so the names that come up in the building of the stadiums would be Bulelani Ngcuka, Tokyo Sekwale, the new black billionaires on the block.
It's a very, 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 very great achievement. The only thing I would like to see happen is that all this should try and filter down to the small businessmen. It shouldn't be kept at the top there, where all the big guys are going to grab everything for themselves and not look at the small business community.
In South Africa, because of the massive disparity of wealth and the incredible poverty that exists, I think it's actually something that is embarrassing for South Africa to be doing at this point in time. When you have almost 40% of your population that is unemployed, you have such an incredible HIV rate, you have such incredible problems, and you're hosting a tournament which is essentially for elites.
Our healthcare system is in a complete shambles. Life expectancy has tumbled down. Money that would go for your basic infrastructure like housing, public health, education, even sports fields in the old apartheid townships will be siphoned off into these mega developments. And so you're based on a sort of trickle-down understanding of the economy which has been shown to be in complete disrepute.
Finally, as the continent Africa, the world has indicated to us that we have a potential of hosting this big event. And to us, this should be a platform to exhibit what we think that belongs to us.
Well, it will be tremendous benefit, no doubt. I think apart, obviously, from the 5 or 6 weeks, which we probably get a lot of tourists in, revenue will be there, definitely for our industry, but not just for our industry, I think for the whole country.
I think there are a lot of benefits. There are a lot of material benefits, but there are also personal and spiritual benefits. If we're good enough to host a World Cup, we're good enough to do anything that we pretty much dream of doing in our lives, and that goes beyond 2010.
But I think what national pride can generate in this is a somewhat dangerous distraction from the real issues of the day. And if politicians are going to say, look, we've hosted a big World Cup, and let's just brush aside these problems of worsening inequality, deep poverty, the unemployment rate now increasing as the economy goes south. I mean, these are the sorts of things that they'll need, kind of a bread and circus instead of really coming to grips with the problems in the society. And in that sense, it's the worst kind of nationalism. It's a self-delusional false consciousness in which people think, well, we must feel good about being South African because we're hosting the World Cup.
The amount of money that is being expended on those stadia, on transport to get there, on airports, on a whole range of things that will cater for foreign tourists as well as those that can afford to see the World Cup and enjoy it, is not going to benefit the majority of the people. I think these kinds of grand events are preying oftentimes on people's desperation that somehow they are going to benefit and that they will, something will get better.
Of the 2010 stadiums, we have 22,000 jobs created, but most of these jobs are short-term jobs where workers are employed by subcontractors or labor brokers for 3 months duration. So there's no sustainable employment. This is just short-term employment for construction workers at low wages, and in turn ensures huge profits for construction companies, making on average 218% for the 2007 financial year.
Certainly we enjoy sport, and we would love to have more sport, but we don't want sport sold to us on the basis of a deception, of promises that are not going to be fulfilled.
There's not much to look forward to for most people right now, and an event like this is something that can excite them, and not just for the sporting aspect, but for maybe their socioeconomic status. I think it's a hollow promise, personally, but I do understand it.
I'm not slouched, am I? It's fine.
No, you're not good. No.
Okay. I'm Senior Superintendent Vishnu Naidu. I'm a National Police spokesperson. I'm also the spokesperson for the National Joint Planning Committee for Security for both the Confederations Cup as well as the FIFA World Cup in 2010.
Features of South Africa's suburban landscape are high walls, electric fences, signs attesting to the voltage in use, and private security personnel standing guard at automated gates.
We are not feeling secure. I mean, it's not good when you have to keep, as it were, looking over your shoulder. We are living in virtual prisons in our homes.
They have to basically keep low-income black people out of their neighborhoods with boom gates, out of their properties with fancy electric fencing, out of their cars with extraordinary alarm systems, and out of their lives. And so insulation has become, for those who can afford it, the way to deal with crime.
It is conceivable that the volume of bricks and mortar used to erect the boundary walls that fortify these homes would be sufficient to have built the dwellings needed to resolve the country's housing shortage. Despite the lengths to which South Africans go to secure themselves and their property, a regular refrain is that all countries have crime. There is, of course, substance to that assertion, but it cannot diminish the extent of the South African problem. There are fewer murders each year in the United States, with a population more than 6 times the size of South Africa's. The 2010 organisers acknowledge that crime is a real issue in South Africa, but dispute that it will have a bearing on the event itself.
Lots of people visiting South Africa are of this opinion that crime is out of control in South Africa, and what we have to do is to try and curb the perception that crime is out of control and to put crime and criminal activities in the context in which it's happening.
People like to talk about crime in South Africa, but they mean the hijackings and so on that are very public. But crime inside of townships, it's replete with all kinds of petty criminals feeding off the poor. So it's really your factory worker jumping off your train or taxi that becomes a victim.
A great deal of the crime is very sophisticated. It's not poor people. Poor people are incredibly proud people. They hate handouts, most of them. You know, it's not poor people per se, nor is it poverty per se.
But there are other factors as well, but I'm convinced that if people are poor, if people are reduced to being in a desperate state, they're likely to resort to crime out of a need to survive.
It's not something that I am proud of, but certainly when you look at murders in our country, that rate is huge. But it is between people who often know each other. Some of it might be linked to poverty, but I would think that a lot of it is not as a result of poverty.
Poverty can exacerbate things, but I mean, the people who are able to tail tourists from the airport follow them to their destinations are not poor, are not the people who live in the shacks.
Yeah, you can do anything if you are hungry. Yeah, if you are starving, you can even kill a person. Yeah, and you get some money and you get life.
But it's not an African thing. You know, Zimbabwe today, the levels of crime, the levels of violence are below South Africa. And we'll get there.
The routes will be policed to the accommodation, to the venues, to the tourist destinations. So I don't think that we have to concern ourselves too much with our tourists having to take any risk. However, having said that, they should be vigilant, should I say, in all aspects, whether it's vigilance towards the possibility of being hijacked or property being stolen from them. But it's not to an extent where they should be paranoid.
You're not actually stepping over corpses on the pavement.
When you host an event like the World Cup, you have all the information. And it's information that provides the basis for safeguarding people. If I have all the information of all your movement, I can give you the guarantee that you will be 100% safe.
The SA 2010 Getting to the Stadium Handbook. And this is the kind of stuff that really happens in South Africa. When in a taxi, always keep your head down. You know, there's lots of taxi wars and people genuinely getting shot up in these things. A well-timed toilet visit may prevent being thrown off the train. May prevent, of course. Try to exit the bus before it is torched. Problems en route, do not call security.
I'm not saying that the odd tourist won't cop it, but the point is anywhere in the world the odd tourist is going to cop it.
Well, I mean, one of the things that South Africa did in the bid itself was to emphasize this wasn't South Africa's World Cup, it was Africa's turn. But this has already started to ring hollow, and nothing makes that ring more hollow than the recent xenophobic attacks, where African immigrants were picked upon, killed, slaughtered in the streets. So even Somalis were begging to go back to Somalia. That the Home Affairs, the police, have all been geared to display a virulent xenophobia. In fact, you know, people have made a big point about the way African immigrants were identified. You were asked just whether you could say the Zulu word for elbow. And if you couldn't say the Zulu word for elbow, you were killed. Well, in the police operating manual, it tells the police one of the ways you can identify an African immigrant is if you ask them what is the Zulu word for elbow.
Now, since I came here in South Africa, I never stayed in location. I just stay here in the city center. For me, it's better than staying in the location because they're treating us very bad. And then they say we are taking their jobs, but we don't take their jobs. We are selling art. We are selling art.
The desperation experienced by a segment of the South African population is actually now being seen as caused by these interlopers, strangers, foreigners coming from other parts of Africa. And the claim is we are losing homes, we are losing opportunities. So it's not wrong to describe it as xenophobia in the sense that there is this hostility to foreigners. But it seems to me the real anger and the real resentment is more about desperation.
In the world entirely, there's no country which does not have crime. But South Africa is one of the most safest countries, I can assure you. And whoever comes up with crime, we are going as the community, as South Africans, fight those people. And we have seen it happening in the past 4 weeks. 8 criminals were killed in scenes of crimes. As South Africans, we are working very hard to eradicate crime. And when they come here, South Africa will be a sweet home.
Well, I'd probably say we've got 42 million security guards in South Africa. Every single South African is going to try and make the World Cup very safe.
One hopes, that our police are going to be up to dealing with crime, that it's going to be safe.
We have purchased some fantastic toys. We hope that we will be able to use come 2010 because we don't want to have to spend so many millions of rands and not be able to use it. Purchase water cannons, body armor for crowd control and crowd management, surveillance equipment to feed us on the ground with information so that we can be proactive in the event something does come up as far as hooliganism is concerned.
Who do you think is going to win the World Cup?
Bafana Bafana.
After returning to the international fold following apartheid's demise, South Africa's national team, Bafana Bafana, became African champions in 1996, and by August of that year had climbed to their highest ever position in FIFA's rankings, 16th in the world. When the first interviews for this film were conducted in November 2008, Bafana Bafana were ranked 80th in FIFA's world rankings. By the 1st of July 2009, following the Confederations Cup, they had moved to 70th place. Were South Africa not hosting the 2010 World Cup, its national team would not be taking to the field. Bafana Bafana were knocked out of the second African qualifying round for the World Cup in October 2008. A source of concern is that an early exit by Bafana Bafana in 2010 will leave the tournament deprived of the energy and excitement of local fans, and lacking that X factor which made the last tournament in Germany such a success. Despite the team's declining fortunes, people on the streets of South Africa remain undaunted and optimistic about the chances of their team. In that spirit, we asked Danny Jordan who Bafana Bafana would beat in the final.
No, I think we must be realistic. I think our team needs to work hard.
You had the 1996 African Cup of Nations here, and the whole country was just sort of swept along, and we peaked too soon. You know, we immediately were at the top, we won, and since then it's just gone downhill. You know, I mean, 2 years later we lost in the final, still good. 2 years later we were in the semi-finals. I think we finished third. The next Nations Cup we went down. We went out, I think, in the quarterfinals. We lost twice then in the first round, the last time without scoring. And this year we didn't even qualify. I mean, if you think about it, our football budget is probably as big as the GDP of some of the countries that we're playing against, and we can't even qualify.
If I look at the current squad, you know, South African squad, vis-a-vis the squad that played against Argentina here at Rand Stadium, and we beat Argentina 5-1.
And it was then that Jomo Sono first showed that he would become a world-class player, beating the Argentinian keeper time and time again with an accuracy and eye for goal opportunities that was almost uncanny.
I scored 4 goals, Ace scored 1 goal. I can tell you now, with half a leg, these players now wouldn't match those players during that time, and that's a fact.
Our players are too content, too satisfied with the local leagues. You know, I mean, a player here in South Africa can earn good money.
The way they are so stupid, they don't even think that this career is very short. They're living in a comfort zone here. It's too comfortable for them here. And they come to the dressing room with 3 cell phones. He hasn't got a business. He's got 3 cell phones. I have about 20 businesses, I use 1 cell phone. Yeah, you find him, that's why they can make it.
You go into our townships, every kid kicks the ball. I'm not exaggerating. We have the raw talent to be up there with the best in the world. It's just about SAFA getting their house in order.
I did this cartoon, the SAFA Diary, you know, a Monday disaster, then blunder, fiasco, debacle, bungle, cock-up, chaos. And, you know, probably any given week you could probably do one of these. It's appalling. I did this when the FIFA people came here. The facilities are impressive, but what about the violence? Don't worry, that's just SAFA executives. And it goes for other sports too. But I must say, they've got to get their act together.
All they want to see is how much money I can reap out of football. There's nothing, they don't put money back into development. They put back into the development maybe 5%. 95% of the money goes into that car, that aeroplane, that traveling, that entertainment, all these funny little things.
Their budget, I found out that almost 65 to 70% of the budget is spent on salaries and administration and overhead costs. Where 95 to 99% of the soccer players in this country reside, that gets less than 1/3 of the budget.
There's a lot of money in football. But the problem in Africa, there's too many dishonest officials. Too many of them.
I don't for one minute doubt that there is enough talent in this country. But I think the key element here is that nothing much has changed in the hierarchy of football in South Africa. And the philosophy, the technical philosophy, in my opinion, is inadequate for a longer term plan. It's kind of always putting out fires rather than making plans for the future.
A country like Germany that has been so successful, you know, at the time they had like 4 coaches in 50 years, you know, and we've got 50 coaches in 4 years, which is a little bit exaggerated. But if you look at the coaches we've had some really good coaches who've achieved tremendous success with other countries, and yet in South Africa they just achieve nothing. With Joel Santana, you know, it just doesn't make sense to have a coach who hasn't got the kind of name that, you know, you put to Carlos Alberto Pereira, everybody knows him. I'd like to guarantee you that not one of the South African players had ever heard of Joel Santana. I mean, I'm a football journalist. I had not heard of him before.
I think Bafana Bafana is doing very well. I think Bafana Bafana is going to win the World Cup.
I hope again he's going to do well, but I don't think Ken is going to be in the first 4. I don't wish them to beat Italy. That is for sure.
Maybe it's not a dog should beat the Germans. Maybe we should have the final like the Italians and the Germans.
I'm a patriot South African. I will never say South Africa will not win the World Cup. I still have hope. In actual fact, we are like a snake. You must not come to our own hole and think that you'll go away with it.
You never know, you know, because one must never underestimate the support of the local people.
You know, that playing at home factor, that 12th player that is there will do wonders for the players. And I think our players are being underestimated. We've got exceptional players, and I think they'll do well. We've got your Teko Modises, we've got Bernard Parker, we've got enough young players that the world doesn't know anything about. I think they'll surprise many people.
It would be so nice that I could sit here and say an African team. Well, first prize obviously would be if I could say South Africa. But I mean, FIFA would have to do so much rigging that not even they could make that, I think, possible, that South Africa can be in the final 4.
Oh, as a FIFA representative, I'm not allowed to say that. I have to be neutral, which is an easy thing for me because I'm a Swiss.
I think come 2010, we're gonna step up. We're gonna rise to the occasion, and we just have to, you know, for the tournament also to be exciting, and we know what's at stake, you know, and I'm very confident about it.
The stage is set for obviously being able to be recognised, to be able to play overseas, to be competitive, but mainly to represent your country. I think what a dream for all South Africans when they go to bed at night, scoring the winning goal against Brazil. I think nothing could be nicer.
2020 I will be supporting Bafana Bafana because I'm staying here in South Africa. I can't support another team where I'm not staying there, but I will be supporting Bafana Bafana. I wish them lucky to reach the finals.
On a misty Saturday afternoon in December 2008, we travelled to Swayimana in the KwaZulu-Natal Midlands to have an audience with revered Sangoma and Inyanga Zondeni Gabusa.
Nginyanga baba. Ngisangoma. Lo msebenzi ngawuqala 1960 ngize ngibe ngaka kusamakhambi uyahlanganisa ngiyahamba ngowafuna entabeni.
It's a psychological thing, and you cannot undermine it, because as a coach you want the best for your players. You want your players to give you 100%, and if that is going to give you 100%, so be it. It's not poison.
Senginikhombisa imfihlo ke manje.
I'm made to believe around the clubs, yes, that is very rife. Individual players as well. They might be using whatever muti which they believe. But in the national team, it's difficult.
Ngo-82 kade ngidlala nami ibhola. Lo nomqeqeshi ongcono namakhambi ewalalela umqeqeshi wami. Niyazi nani shele.
It's also an in thing in Europe. I can give you one example. In Turkey, they slaughter a sheep, they touch the blood of the sheep, and they do this. You know, we as Africans, we say that's muti.
Ekugcobile ugoalkeeper lesitha sakhe siza kuyena. Asizwabona kahle amabhala. Vesi umuntu webhola ufuna inhlanhla. Ufuna mebehlasela lapha. Izitha. Bakwazi ukukola, bakwazi ukunemba, ukujikijela into. Ifika ishaye kuwena. Usuke wenzela ukuthi meyiphonza le nduku ekhahlela lapha livele eqonde la ifuna liye khona.
Playing 11 witch doctors. If you leave the ball in the center of the pitch and say to the witch doctor, your muti must score, that ball won't move.
Yebo. Babona umuthi ngoba ngine guarantee yalento. Ngana isigalanti lalokho. Ngoba singakhuluma ukuthi akuphela akuze siqede isizini basikhokhele.
As I say, I'm just a herbalist, although I have certain herbs to enhance a sportsman. I don't have any of the herbs to make them win though.
This one, he says, all right, you can run the whole day. You never get tired.
Kufanele abaphathi bayo, hayi team, abaphathi beteam okufuna beze bakhulume nenyanga. Ngiyahlaba ngeke ngibuke idlala. Ngihlaba okhoshi. Ngihlaba okhoshi bashintsha kakhulu okhoshi. Bayeko okhoshi esibabonayo nala. Basilandela okhoshi baphesheya babalethela. Bashiya okhoshi kade besiwina ngabo la.
If you still believe that now we need spiritual assistance and there's Nyangas in Sangoma in this country, but I believe all of them have to rally behind the team. That whatever they are, when they are playing the match, they have to put things together.
Are you all right, sir?
Very good.
Very good, eh?
Who's going to win the World Cup?
World Cup? Who's going to win the World Cup?
World Cup.
Is the winner by which team?
Easy.
World Cup bolo. So what does it about mang or team that win 2010 World Cup?
I've never won South Africa.
Shabab for Cameroon mo. Who are?
I belong in Qatar.
I do still believe most profoundly that it was a really serious mistake. There's certainly been no criticism of how it's done because nobody's actually evaluated how it's being done. I mean, if anything, we've been sold on the architectural review pictures of, you know, these leaping arches and so on, which is a great thing to look at. We've been seduced by all of that without any ability to critically evaluate it.
We are a fantastic bunch of people when we give ourselves the chance. And I hope, that one of the most important spin-offs is going to be our recovering pride in ourselves, in our country.
Mina ngizimisela ukuthi siyiwine indebe yomhlaba. Ngoba kuyoba buhlungu kakhulu mesingayiwinanga.
It doesn't matter whether Bafana makes its way through, those stadiums will be full. You know, people are going to love it. You're going to have an African team in the finals. There's no doubt in my mind.
It's going to be a really nice challenge for us. And we can only grow from there.
Soccer in South Africa is, as they say, the people's game. And in that sense, I can understand the excitement. Underlying that is almost a desperation. People are hoping something will come their way because they've seen so little. In social terms, I think that is partly explains why people will not have a very critical perspective.
I don't think it's the right thing to do to gloss over the problems. That's the last thing I'm going to do. You know, as a cartoonist, I'm not a praise singer. You know, we've got to be there pointing out the errors as well.
This is the first World Cup in Africa. Africa has many things to offer. You know, I always say to the world that when you come to Africa, you'll eat different food. We slaughter animals, cows and goats, and we don't throw away the intestines, we eat them. they must come to Africa and taste a taste of Interstyles.
Of course, there would have been easier places to organize somewhere in the world a World Cup. It's time now that football is coming to the African continent, and I think this is it's just time to give back something to the continent.
FIFA is not particularly interested in what it means to the country. They want everybody to say how great FIFA is, how great South Africa is, what a wonderful host they are, and what happens at the end of it is really not of their concern. For the person living in a township, I don't think, unfortunately, the Football World Cup is going to have any benefit.
The tragedy is that public funds have been looted for a moment in our history. People are still going to be living in shacks. The jobs are not sustainable. This is a blatant misuse of funds and a language and a message about what the World Cup brings that is a lie.
We are working hard to make that claim that this is going to be the best World Cup ever a reality.
Well, at the end, it's about football, and the people want to see a nice and good tournament.
Well, it goes all the way back to the days of the Roman Empire, I guess, that talked about bread and circuses. You can keep the masses happy just by keeping them busy and making sure they're fed. Unfortunately, yeah, there isn't even the bread.
I would say, you know, with all of the many negative things that are taking place in Africa, this is a superb moment for us. If we are going to have white elephants, so be it.
And 3, and 2, and 1, so get down, but the vitesse of people.
Okay, good.